Welcome to the starting point. At this time, viewers familiar with the Sabbath School get ready to start a new cycle of Bible studies. In this case, we'll study the book of Joshua. I have the pleasure to share with you a conversation with the principal contributor to the study guides, Dr. Barna Magyarosi. He is a recognized specialist on Joshua and has also authored the section on Joshua in the International Seventh-day Adventist Bible Commentary. Dr. Magyarosi comes from the same country as I do, Romania, and we are good friends. Recently, he has been called to serve as president of the Adventist Church in a part of Europe, the so-called Inter-European Division. My prayer is that this interview will prepare our minds and our hearts to have an edifying experience of daily Bible study at home and in the weekly Sabbath School classes. I'm very glad to meet you this way. Welcome to the starting point.
Thank you for the invitation.
In fact, if you remember, this is not the first time at the starting point. Maybe 12, 13 years ago, we had
Yes.
an interview in Bucharest, but now everything has changed for you, for me, and many, many other things. However, probably not many will remember details of that conversation. So would you like to introduce yourself, especially with an emphasis on early influences, a little bit about your family of origin and your earliest encounters with faith, Bible, church?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, I was born in Transylvania, in a city called Târgu Mureș, and my parents came from a Hungarian ethnic background. My father worked as a pharmacist, my mother as a music teacher, and we were probably 7, 8 year old when my mother discovered different aspects of the Bible that she was not aware of. She came from a Christian background, but she discovered that the Bible has more to say about Christian life. And she took some difficult decisions, but of course, those also influenced our life.
Mm-hmm.
So I have been in touch with the Seventh-day Adventist Church from that age of 7, 8 or so. But of course, having a father who was not religious, a declared agnostic, he was not interested in faith, Bible, anything like that. And as a boy, I was more attracted to a handball game or a football game that was played when my mother and my sister went to church, of course. But of course, my father at the same time was a very open-minded person, and he never made an issue of the fact that my mother and my sister decided to go to church and attend the service there. In that respect, we had a very peaceful family. We never had a conflict over issues related to religion, faith, or belief. Of course, I've seen my mother pray. I have listened to advices coming from my mother, how to understand God's will, how to deal with the Bible, how to interpret the Bible. And those probably accompanied me and made an impression on me, even if in my late teenage years, probably, or mid-teenage years, I was completely uninterested in faith, in God, in the church. Until the local pastor, who has become my spiritual father, my mentor, some of you probably know Brother Sass, Ernest.
Sure.
He asked me one day, what are you going to do with your life, with your future? And I said, I told him about my plans to become a medical doctor and all that. He said, think about it, because I think, we would like to send you to become a pastor. Of course, he didn't allow me to react to that question. He just turned around and left me with the question. And that question didn't give me peace. This was at the beginning of the summer vacation before my senior high school year. And I couldn't, get that question out of my mind. I was thinking about that. Then I came back to him one day and I told him, I am preparing for the medical school and I know that you have to study for that. It's just not like I go and just walk into the medical school. So probably if I wanted to be a pastor or study theology, I also had to read something. But of course, I have no intention of studying that. But what if? What should I read? And then he told me, you can start with Desire of Ages and the New Testament in parallel. Just read that. And that book, Desire of Ages, with the New Testament, they changed my life. It turned my life completely inside out and upside down. And I realized that I cannot just continue as I was. I needed to change something. And if God did that for me in Jesus, then I cannot ignore that. I had to respond to that. And then step by step, of course, that led to different other biblical studies and readings that determined me finally to take the decision to study theology instead of medicine.
And you began theological studies that next year, immediately after that? Or?
And after that, yes, I finished high school. So I went into my senior years of study in high school, and then I applied to study theology. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. And then you worked for a while as a pastor. Where?
I started to work in the South Transylvania Conference as a pastor. I started in near my hometown, but in a completely different church in Küntenica. If somebody knows Hergelia, our health center, it's right next to that place. Yes.
But then you continued to show an interest in learning more about theology and expanding your theological horizon. So what was next in this regard?
Yes, I've been always interested in studying deeper, and then the master's program with Andrews University at Distant Education opened at Cernica, and I was invited to study. So that was my first step. I finished that program, and then I was invited to become a lecturer at our theological institute that is known today as Adventist University, where I taught Old Testament subjects. And then, of course, if you want to go that route, you have to study for a doctorate. So I applied for a program at the University of Bucharest, and I finished that doctoral program, I think, in 2019 or so. That was my first step into deeper studies.
Yeah. By then, you were already interested or going deeper in an area which is related to our topic today. We are going to discuss.
Yes,
today.
I became interested in this topic because I had personal questions. And I had lots of questions from my church members concerning, what type of God or what kind of God is that who orders his own people to kill almost indiscriminately wholesale populations
Mhm.
in the ancient land of Canaan.
Mhm.
And that question bothered me a lot. I started to study, I started to look into that question. I had some type of the regular, typical answers, but some of those were not completely satisfying. So I said I would like to study that much deeper. And that's how I arrived to my topic of my doctoral dissertation, to study the wars, the holy wars of the Bible in the Old Testament, with a special emphasis on the book of Exodus, book of Joshua, and Judges, and so on.
Good. And I understand that this deeper study helped you to reach more satisfying answers for you and for others. Probably not removing totally any, any difficult point or but you felt more well grounded.
Yes, I hope, and I felt that I have answered some questions that are crucial.
Mhm.
Of course, there will be questions that remain, but I think if we put that into the context that my study has created, they are easier to handle, and they are easier to wait for a full answer.
Sure. Briefly, after a time you spent at the theological seminary in Bucharest as teaching, and then as president of the school, you have been asked to work on the regional organization of our church for part of Europe, inter-European division. What were your first assignments there?
I've been invited to work as the director of the education department for this European section. And I did that for 5 years. And after 5 years, they have asked me to function as the executive secretary of that same organization, which I did for 10 years until this summer, basically. Yes.
Yeah, let me tell the viewers, those who don't know yet, that just a few weeks ago at the World Congress of our church, we have been elected as the president of this regional organization, Inter-European Division, and as this is the first time we have the opportunity to
Yes.
conversation, I wish you well, and
Thank you.
I can tell you that I pray for you to be inspired,
I
guided.
told everyone who came to congratulate, I don't need your congratulations, I need your prayers.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Now, let's return to the main topic of our conversation. And so you have written the study Bible guides for the Sabbath School on the book of Joshua. That's for the last quarter of the year 2025. Do you remember how did it come to be asked? Because I suppose you didn't announce I'd like to do that. Suppose you have been asked.
No, we rarely have the time to do that. I have been probably recommended by somebody to the editor of to the main editor of the Sabbath School Quarterly.
Yeah.
And I received an email if I would be interested to develop a quarterly study on the book of Joshua.
Mhm.
And I have just finished by then a commentary on the book of Joshua.
Oh, I didn't know.
This is the Seventh-day Adventist International Bible Commentary that I wrote a section for the book of Joshua. So I felt that I have gathered enough material to easily write a Sabbath School Quarterly. I had the material fresh in my memory. Of course, this is a completely different approach. It's not at the same level. It is more practical and a spiritual approach. but I thought that I have enough to write a Sabbath School quarterly. So after a few days of analyzing the subject and looking at a possible structure for the quarterly, I have accepted that, yes.
Oh, thank you. I had no idea that you wrote on Joshua for the new Seventh-day Adventist International Commentary.
Yes.
Do you have any idea when it's going to be
It's
published?
out. It's out. It was 2024 January that it came out. So
I'm quite outdated.
yeah, sometimes it's a lot coming out, so it's difficult to keep up with everything.
Wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. And by the way, it's not the first time when I interview someone who wrote for the Sabbath School on the same topic. They wrote for the International Seventh-day Adventist Bible Commentary.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yes.
Yeah, I did it with Jacques Ducan, with Dragoslava Santrach, with
Jerzy probably, Jerzy Moskala.
absolutely with Jerome Skinner, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's very interesting because, as you said, there are totally not totally, but quite different audiences meant and different approach. And it's also, while the commentary is for quite a specialized group of readers, the Sabbath School Bible study guides go to everyone, everywhere, from people who barely read to people with multiple PhDs,
Yeah.
all cultures, young and old, people who are just Adventist and people who have been Adventists for decades or generations, and
Yeah.
totally different. However, I mean, I don't want to downplay at all the value of the Bible commentary, but you know, people, maybe a few thousand, yeah, people will read that, especially when they need to clarify something, a Bible
Yeah.
commentary.
And
Usually,
it's rare that somebody will read one from cover to cover.
yeah, that's very
That's
rare.
not what commentaries are made for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
while this study guides will go to tens of millions of people, and they will be hopefully day by day on their Bible. I mean, on their desk. So, how was your experience with writing those lessons? Do you remember when did you work there? Because the production cycle for this is very long.
It started a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Uh, it was not easy because you, as a church administrator, you travel a lot.
Mhm.
I have worked in hotel rooms using the TV as a second screen. I always had an HDMI cable with me to see if I can plug it to a TV set. So I have been working in airports, in airplanes, in all kinds of situations. Um, what the most difficult thing is that you have the straight jacket
Okay.
of 720
Words. Perfect.
or 40 words per day.
Yeah.
And you have to say what you need to say, and you have to make it in 700 and a few words.
Yeah.
And if you have more to say, then you have to see what you want to cut. Sometimes, if you want to make it for 2 days, then what you need to add, that is not going to complicate things, but they are going to help understand the subject. So it's not easy. When you write a book, when you write a commentary, you have some limitations, but it's a big general limitation of, I don't know, 15,000 words.
Yeah.
And then you make it. But every single day you have the same amount of words. That requires a lot of discipline.
Yeah.
So I have promised myself that I would never, ever criticize a Sabbath school
Oh,
really.
good. Let's start with a few other technical questions. which are not actually dealt with, as I remember, in the Bible study guides. What can I say about the order, the time of writing, initial readers, things like that?
You mean about the quarterly?
Yes, not about the book of Joshua.
The book of Joshua. Okay, thank you. The book of Joshua is basically is a link. It links the 5 book of Moses, which is the beginning of Israel as a nation. Of course, it starts with Exodus and then in the wilderness. And we know that because of their unfaithfulness, they had to spend much more time in the wilderness than it was originally intended by God. And then to a nation that is already settled in the land. So if the book of Joshua was missing from the Bible, then it would be very difficult to understand how they got from this nation wandering in the wilderness to this nation that is already settled in Canaan.
Mm-hmm.
So from that perspective, we think that the book of Joshua has a very important message. The other element is the book of Joshua contains several indications that the person that wrote the book was an eyewitness of what happened there. And of course, both Jewish and Christian traditions attribute the authorship of the book to Joshua himself, who is the main character.
Mm-hmm.
And we have indications that this is most probable.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there is a last section of the book that describes the death of Joshua and what happened shortly after. It, of course, naturally couldn't have been written by Joshua himself, but everything else is very probable that comes from the pen of Joshua himself. And he's been the companion of Moses for a long period of time. So yes, he appears as a warrior in the forefront of the book, but that does not mean that he did not have an intellectual background and an education received from Moses to read and write and all those things that wouldn't have made possible for him to be the author of the book.
Yeah, good. Do we have any extra biblical sources, archaeological or literary or otherwise, that corroborate with the information, with the historical information we have in the book of Joshua?
Of course, most of these are archaeological evidences. I mean, excavations that was done at Jericho and at Hatzor. They attest a violent and not only one but several destruction in both places. We don't have the time to go into all the details, but there is significant evidence. And if people want to read about that, my commentary deals with some of these issues, and my commentary even have externally authored vignettes that are in the commentary that deal with specific issues related to archaeology. As I'm not an archaeologist, of course I studied archaeology, but my main emphasis has not been archaeology. But yes, there is significant evidence that speak about a violent occupation, not in every single place, but in places that the Bible mentioned that it happened, we have evidence on that.
Are there any major challenges to the historicity of this book? I mean, places where we have reasons to question, in your opinion?
I mean, if we take a critical approach to the Bible and we do not accept that this is inspired by God,
Mm-hmm.
and then we need to come with another theory for the whole book and the context that people take it to a post-exilic context. And they say, oh, this book has been invented to encourage the returning Israelites so that they can possess the land again, just as in the time of Joshua and all that. But there is no indication in the Bible of such an interpretation. So if we do not borrow some alien theories to the Bible, I think we have good evidence that the book of Joshua describes events that happened after the wilderness period and before settling in the land.
I see. Thank you. Now, coming closer to what you have written for the Sabbath School, what was your approach? How did you organize the material? Did you follow the chapters of the book in their order, or you have chosen some themes, or both? So
I tried to make a combination of the two because, of course, the book of Joshua has 24 chapters. But out of those 24 chapters, starting with chapter 12, 13, and all the way to 21, we have border lists.
yes.
And those are so interesting
Hmm.
that readers will fall asleep if they are not really experts in archaeology and ancient history and topography and all those things. So you cannot take chapter by chapter some of the parts of the book. You have to have a combination of both. I try to go through the story of the book of Joshua by chapters, and then I have one or two thematic chapters that deal with the theology of the land. What is the foundation for an understanding of the possession of the land by Israel, and this interesting relationship between God, the land, and Israel, and how they interrelate to one another. What is the role of the land in the faith and the connection of Israel to God, and elements like this. So I deal with that a little bit. But other than that, I try to stick to chapters of the Bible. And of course, the big question of the book of Joshua, the destruction of the Canaanites, I think I dedicated about 2 chapters to that, but that is not completely theological and theoretical. It deals with the text.
I see. Let's return a little bit to these two main names of the book, Joshua and Canaan. Joshua, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, we know quite a number of persons bearing the same name. So I'd like you to explain a little bit the meaning of the name and how significant is that. But it seems that the name went in the New Testament as well in a different form. And it could be also the name used for our Savior. If so, what is the meaning of that?
Yeah, the name of Joshua comes from the Hebrew Yehoshua. And Yehoshua comes from, it's a composite name, meaning that the Lord saves. And of course, if we look at the New Testament, the angel clearly indicates, that this is going to be the name of Jesus, is going to be, and most probably, I don't know what language was the angel speaking, but if the angel spoke Hebrew, then he must have used this word. His name will be Yehoshua because he will save his people from their sins. So it's a clear connection if we take the two names, but there's much more. And I have dedicated at least one lesson to the typology of the book of Joshua to show how the character of Joshua is pointing forward to Jesus and the work that he did, how it is a foreshadowing of what Jesus accomplished for us.
That's wonderful. Indeed, we read he will be named Jesus because he will save. But for us, there is no connection. We don't understand why he will be called Jesus, because he will save. But when with this explanation, all of a sudden we get light out of it.
Yes.
Would you
Yeah.
like to add a few more connections? In what ways Joshua of the Old Testament is a type of our Savior?
First of all, and this is a major topic, of course, but and what I try to show is that God has never intended for Israel to really kill people and fight.
Mm-hmm.
And that model comes from the Exodus. He says, you stand still, and I'm going to fight for you. You don't have to do it. I will do it for you.
Mm.
And if it comes to our salvation,
Mm.
I think if we believe in salvation through faith and grace, it is not our work. It is something that Jesus has accomplished for us. It is something that he is accomplishing for us and in us. So in that respect, Joshua and Jesus, Yehoshua of the Old Testament and Yehoshua of the New Testament, they are similar in that way, because they had to rely on that salvation that God provides.
Yes.
And we have to rely on that salvation that God provides. And we only have to trust him. If we trust him, he is going to accomplish the work of salvation in us, for us, and through us. Another element is that Joshua gives the inheritance to the Israelites. He allots the land with all the boundaries and everything. And of course, before they enter the land, they have to go through the Jordan. And as they pass through the river Jordan, then the New Testament picks up this theme, and it says, as they were baptized in the Jordan River, and even he goes even further than that, he speaks about the cloud, and they have been baptized in the cloud. So this experience becomes the experience of every single Christian when they decide to follow Jesus, and they go through this experience of immersion through baptism. So that's another element. Then giving the inheritance. The New Testament picks up this theme, especially in the book of Hebrews.
Yes.
And he speaks about the fact that our high priest Jesus secured an inheritance, a heavenly inheritance for us. And that is already ready and waiting for us in heaven. We just have to appropriate that by faith. We have to claim it, and we have to believe it that it is ours. And it was the same with the ancient Israelites. It was not by big military power and armies that they have managed to do that. God has provided it for them. And of course, there is this aspect that it's amazing in the book of Joshua, after describing all these battles and all that, it says, and then finally the land had rest from war. But the Hebrew word, nuach, that is used there, it is not a final rest. It is a temporary rest. And it's amazing that the book of Hebrews picks up on this theme, and it says, Joshua gave them rest, but in the end, he couldn't give them rest. And there is still a rest that has to come for the people of God. And of course, in this aspect, the book of Joshua points forward, but at the same time, it says it is completed, but it's not completely completed. It is not, there is something yet to come. And then in Jesus, we have secured our rest. We are saved. But as we know, we are in this period between the already and the not yet. As the book of Joshua was in this phase, they had already gained a foothold in the land. They have secured the land for themselves. But then you have I think it's chapter 10 and 11 and 13 and all these regions, they still have not been conquered. They still have to be possessed. So did they conquer or didn't they conquer? It's a complex picture. And I think it's the same with us. Jesus has worked our salvation. He has brought it to completion. It is a full salvation. We can do nothing to add to that salvation. Yet, there is still something to come. Our complete redemption from the consequences of sin and for all the problems of this world. There is still another type of salvation that needs to come in between the already and the not yet. So, in that respect, the book of Joshua also portrays our situation today in yes, we have salvation through Jesus Christ. We have this hope that takes us through life and gives us a very strong anchor into the future and what is coming. But there is something yet to be accomplished in the future, and that's our full salvation, the consumption of the plan of salvation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could go on and on. Stop me whenever you think we have to stop. Yes.
Yeah, and I think this is also very important in a special way for us as Seventh-day Adventists, with our emphasis on the Sabbath rest, and probably, meeting the same danger as the Israelites of ancient times, to be satisfied with entering in the earthly rest, but not having that faith to enter the final rest of salvation. Would you like to add something on that, especially for us as Adventists, Seventh-day Adventists?
Yes. And I link that also to the problem of salvation. I think some of our people might be in the danger of believing that they are saved because they keep the Sabbath. And we know that we are saved through Jesus Christ only and his grace and faith in him.
Mm.
We are not keeping the Sabbath in order to be saved, but because we have already been saved through Jesus Christ. So that's one element, one aspect. The other aspect is that the Sabbath every week should be a foretaste of something more and something better and something more beautiful that is to come.
Mhm.
And I think, yes, Sabbath turns our heads back towards creation. It's a commemoration. But at the same time, Sabbath has to point forward to that rest, the final rest that God is going to give his people here on earth, made new, which is supposed to be our home. We always say we go to heaven. Yes, we go, but that's an intermezzo.
Mhm.
We are supposed to come back here, and that's the original plan, to be finally on earth made new as God planned it
Yes.
originally. And that is the final rest that every Sabbath is pointing forward to.
Thank you. Now, let's take some time. We don't have much time left, but let's take some time to discuss this issue of violence and war and killings. So a few minutes are not going to be enough to give justice to the topic, but just as a foretaste of
Yes.
yes.
Okay. So just to whet the appetite of the listeners to go deeper and study the
Yes.
lesson. I think there is clear evidence that God's original plan was to never involve the Israelites in bloodshed and violence. We have the original ideal plan that is in Exodus. You stand still, I'll fight for you. Number two, there's clear evidence that the involvement of the Israelites into fighting is the result of their lack of faith.
Mhm.
And in the context of the cosmic conflict, in which Satan is the usurper of this earth, and he claims it as his own, and he says, "This is my world, it belongs to me, I have won it for me." And then he says, "Yeah, you, God, you have the right to take a people of your own, but the rest is mine."
Mm.
And God probably has the right to protect his own people as long as they follow him. But when they rebel and when they show the traits of the enemy, then he will always say, why do you protect them? They are mine. Give them to my hand. Let me deal with them because they don't follow you anymore. So as long as they are faithful, God is able to protect them. And it's interesting that Ellen White has a comment in which she says that if they had been faithful, God wouldn't have suffered their enemies to attack them. But what we see is that as they come out of Egypt, constant grumbling, constant murmuring, constant complaints. And then God allows the Amalekites to attack them. And this is the liveliest lesson of faith that you can get. When Moses' hands are held up, the enemy suffers from an unseen hand. They are just, knocked off their horses and they are gone. When the hands are not up, you are hit by the Amalekite. You feel it on your own skin, the difference between when God intervenes and when God does not intervene. And the challenge is, but even after this, there is a clear difference between two things, between dispossession and annihilation. And if you analyze these terminology, you realize that God's original intent was to drive out the Canaanites, not to kill them. But because of this combination of situation in which Israel rebels, they spend 40 more years in the desert. The Canaanites come to the conclusion that they are lost. They have no clue. You don't have to be afraid of them. Their God, after all, is not that great and not that big. And then they rebel themselves against the plan of God. And they don't want to go out.
Yes.
All those who refuse to go out, they will have to face the violence. But other than that, God's original plan was to drive them out. They could have gone to different places. And we have in the book of Judges an example in which a family, when the Israelites are coming, they show them the way to one city, but then he moves to the land of the Hittites. So he finds another place to live. That could have been an option for the Canaanites. But of course, situation had become more complex in that respect. But of course, if you put all this together, we could see that God didn't want violence. He promises that he sends his angel and his terror ahead of the Israelites. And because of that, the Canaanites will decide to leave before the Israelites arrive. But it didn't happen because of several complications due to the faithlessness and the rebellion of the Israelites. Then we see that even this violence is limited in time and geographically. God says that's not going to last forever. You don't have a blank check or permission to kill anybody anywhere and at every time. No. This is for the period until you have a secure control of the land. You secure the foothold in the land and until then. So it's a short period of time. It's limited to the borders of the promised land. And Deuteronomy 20 speaks about the nations that are far away and the nations that are within Canaan. It says for the other nations, you always have to offer peace. That's the rule. So I would say, and then if we put together this picture with the extreme corruptness of the Canaanite culture, that included, all kinds of violent practices from child sacrifice and all these things. It was a society that was almost irredeemable, probably, from God's perspective. But God says, you know what? I give you a chance. And even in this context, we have the example of Rahab. and the Gibeonites.
Mhm.
Rahab opens her heart to the God of the Israelites, and she's saved.
Mhm.
The Gibeonites, they don't clearly understand God's plan, but they understand enough to say, we want to join this group.
Mhm. Mhm.
And of course, they come up with a plan, and that involves some tricks.
Mhm.
But in the end, God does not allow the Israelites to destroy the Gibeonites. He
Mhm.
says, you gave your word to them, you keep them. And they become servants where?
The sanctuary.
Next to the sanctuary,
Yeah,
where they can get an understanding of who God is
the
and
most
what
privileged
kind of
place.
God they have.
Yeah.
So I would say that this annihilation or destruction or violence
Mhm.
wouldn't have been necessary in the first place. And second, only those who were stubborn and rebelled against God's plan, they had to be finally destroyed.
Mhm.
And I would say, but this was like a surgical intervention
Mhm.
in the period of history when God wanted to prepare a place for his people to develop without any harmful influence and to establish a society that lives according to the principles of God, to be an example of what humanity can become under God's guidance. Of course, the plan didn't completely succeed because we are human beings, and God had to play in the sandbox of humanity with what he had.
Sure.
Otherwise, he would have destroyed everyone and created a new humanity. But his plan was to redeem humanity, not to destroy humanity. And I think that is a crucial aspect of this entire topic.
Yeah, thank you very much. Listening to you, of course, in my mind, probably in the mind of of our viewers, that will also evoke scenes of violence taking place right now in those places. And we know that in some Christian circles, quite widespread is the idea that based on God's covenant to Abraham, and on what we study now from the book of Exodus and especially Joshua, that settles the matter forever. That instituted an everlasting right for the privileged nation to own those territories, to rule over them. Is this appropriate, biblically speaking, not politically,
Mhm.
biblically speaking?
I think the Bible has a very clear framework,
Mhm.
and that framework is conditional prophecies.
Mhm.
See that the prophecies of the Old Testament, many of them, they begin with an if. If this happens,
Mhm.
then this is going to be the consequence.
Mhm.
And of course, when the conditions are fulfilled, then we can speak about the fulfillment of those prophecies.
Mhm.
We cannot just take any prophecy from the Old Testament and say because it's written, it has to happen,
Mhm.
and apply it directly without any filter
Mhm.
to the situation today. And for me, the biggest difference is this. In the Old Testament, in the time of Joshua, we had a theocratic nation. Among this nation, the physical presence of God was manifest, and his guidance was evident, clear, and direct. And I don't think that we have today a theocratic nation as it was in that time of Joshua. So it would be very difficult, from my point of view, to take that situation and apply it one-on-one to the situation today.
Mhm. Thank you. I think that's very clear. Who has ears that listen to that? Uh, Two final questions. What is your dream? What is your prayer for the millions of people who will study these Bible study guides for a full quarter. What are your expectations?
My dream is that people will discover a God of love, mercy, and grace amidst the gruesome, violent scenes of the book of Joshua.
Yeah.
And they will see beyond that and see the heart of a loving Father that is broken because of the brokenness of humanity, but a heart that never gives up and wants to redeem whatever can still be redeemed from fallen humanity.
Wonderful. Do you also have some practical advice to the teachers and to the students of the Sabbath School for this quarter?
You know, I have worked probably the hardest to come up with questions that are discussable. So my appeal is, I understand that each teacher tries to have their own approach, but I spent a lot of time to come up with the best questions that I could. Don't ignore them. And also the Friday questions, especially, they will help to have a very good discussion in the groups, I hope.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. From my experience, and probably you can concur to that, those questions are many times simply ignored because
They never get to those ones.
they have too much to discuss about other things. And also sometimes they perceive those questions as too tough to deal with, or yeah, not very relevant. I don't know. So I hope your plea to put aside time and to have enough openness and to courage, or to accept to be vulnerable, because it's easier to discuss questions when we have already the key to the question. Not always those questions have the key printed down at the
That's true.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me and to our viewers. And it's indeed very interesting that somehow, I think it was not the original plan, but somehow it happens that we have the book of Exodus and the book of Joshua back to back, one after another.
I was happy about that because Exodus prepares Joshua extremely well.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and
Thank you for the possibility.
I wish you God's guidance, and let's see how the Lord will guide His people to the eternal rest as soon as possible. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. I hope the conversation with Dr. Magyorosi has ignited in us a stronger determination to regularly study the lessons from Joshua and to apply them faithfully to our lives. And let me emphasize the warm appeal made by my guest to pay the most serious attention to the discussion questions, especially those at the end of each week. Joshua was only partially successful in taking into possession the promised land and to lead the people into the rest. But the new Joshua, Jesus Christ, has full authority to give us rest, a joyful entry into the blessed rest of salvation. Let us therefore be diligent to enter that rest. See you soon for the next program.